The boardroom on the 32nd floor of Sterling Industries had witnessed many heated discussions, but nothing quite like what was about to unfold on that Tuesday morning in March. The large glass table reflected the worried faces of 12 department heads, each clutching their quarterly reports like shields against the storm they knew was coming. Sarah Martinez had been the chief operations officer for only 6 months, but she had already earned a reputation for being thorough, fair, and surprisingly calm under pressure. At 34, she was the youngest executive to ever hold such a position at Sterling Industries, a fact that some of her colleagues never let her forget. Her dark hair was pulled back in a professional bun, and she wore a navy blue suit that commanded respect without being flashy. Across the table sat Marcus Whitfield, the vice president of sales, a man who had been with the company for 15 years and believed his experience gave him the right to speak for everyone. At 48, Marcus was tall, broad-shouldered, and had the kind of commanding voice that could fill a room even when he whispered. He had made it clear from day one that he didn't think Sarah deserved her position. The meeting had been called to discuss the company's response to a major client complaint. Meridian Corp, their biggest account worth $12 million annually, had threatened to cancel their contract due to repeated delivery delays and quality issues. The situation was serious enough that CEO Jonathan Sterling himself was expected to join the meeting, though he was currently stuck in traffic from the airport. As the team members filed into the room, Sarah noticed the tension in the air. People were taking sides without even realizing it. Some sat closer to her end of the table, while others gravitated toward Marcus. It was like watching a silent battle formation take shape. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah began, her voice steady and professional. "I know we're all aware of the situation with Meridian Corporation. Before we dive into solutions, I'd like each department to give me a brief overview of how this issue affects your area." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed over his chest. "With all due respect, Sarah, I think we're approaching this all wrong. We don't need to waste time going around the table like we're in some college seminar. I've been handling Meridian for 8 years. I know exactly what went wrong and how to fix it." The room fell silent. Sarah felt the eyes of every person in the room shifting between her and Marcus, waiting to see how she would respond. She had dealt with Marcus's challenging behavior before, but never in front of the entire leadership team. "I appreciate your experience with the account, Marcus," Sarah replied calmly. "Your input will be valuable. But I'd like to hear from all departments first so we can get a complete picture before we make any decisions." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Complete picture? Sarah, you've been here 6 months. Some of us have been dealing with these clients since before you even knew this company existed. Maybe it's time to let the people with actual experience take the lead on this." Jennifer Walsh, the head of customer service, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She had been with the company for 10 years and had always respected the chain of command. But she could see where this was heading, and it wasn't good. David Chen, the IT director, cleared his throat nervously. He was relatively new himself, having joined just 2 years ago, and he didn't want to get caught in the crossfire of office politics. "Marcus," Sarah said, her tone still even but with a slight edge, "I understand you feel strongly about this. However, as COO, I need to ensure we're considering all angles before we proceed. This affects multiple departments, and everyone deserves to have their voice heard." "Oh, come on," Marcus said, standing up from his chair. His 6'2" frame seemed to loom over the table. "This is exactly the problem with this company lately. We spend more time in meetings talking about talking than we do actually solving problems. I've already drafted a response to Meridian. I've outlined the concessions we need to make. All we need to do is implement it." Sarah remained seated, her hands folded calmly on the table. "Marcus, please sit down. We'll get to your proposal, but first." "No, Sarah," Marcus interrupted, his voice getting louder. "I'm not going to sit down and pretend like this democratic approach is going to save a $12 million account. Sometimes leadership means making tough decisions quickly, not holding hands and singing songs." The insult hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Several people around the table looked down at their papers, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the meeting had taken. Lisa Rodriguez, the HR director, looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Tom Bradley, the head of manufacturing, had worked with Marcus for years and usually supported him, but even he looked shocked at the blatant disrespect being shown to Sarah. Furthermore, Marcus continued, now pacing behind his chair, I think it's time we acknowledge that some decisions require experience that can't be learned in 6 months. This isn't about gender or age or any of that politically correct nonsense. It's about results. And my results speak for themselves. Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained steady. Marcus, your concerns are noted. However, this meeting will continue as planned. Please take your seat. Or what? Marcus challenged, spreading his hands wide. You'll write me up? Report me to HR? He glanced at Lisa, who was frantically taking notes. I'm trying to save this company millions of dollars, and you're worried about meeting protocol. The room was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning seemed deafening. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city continued its normal rhythm, oblivious to the corporate drama unfolding 32 floors above the street. Sarah stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. She was several inches shorter than Marcus, but somehow her presence seemed to fill the room. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but every word carried weight. Marcus, I'm going to say this once, and I want everyone in this room to hear it clearly. She paused, making eye contact with each person around the table. This company operates on respect, professionalism, and teamwork. Not on bullying, grandstanding, or undermining the chain of command. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but Sarah held up one hand in a gesture that somehow managed to be both subtle and commanding. I wasn't finished, she said, her tone still calm but with an authority that made Marcus close his mouth. You say your results speak for themselves. Let's talk about results. In the past quarter, your department has missed its targets by 15%. Customer satisfaction scores for accounts you personally manage have dropped by 22%. And now our biggest client is threatening to leave, citing communication issues and unfulfilled promises. The facts hit the room like cold water. Marcus's face began to redden, but Sarah wasn't done. You want to talk about experience? Fine. Let's talk about experience. In my 6 months here, I've implemented new quality control processes that have reduced defects by 30%. I've streamlined our supply chain, cutting costs by $1.2 million annually. And I've done it all while treating every member of this team with the respect they deserve. Marcus tried to interrupt. Those numbers, Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger, are verified by our accounting department and have been reported to the board. Would you like me to call down and have them send up the detailed reports? The threat was polite but unmistakable. Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Now, Sarah said, returning to her seat but maintaining eye contact with Marcus, you have two choices. You can sit down, behave like the professional executive you're supposed to be, and contribute constructively to solving this problem. Or you can continue this performance and explain to CEO Sterling why you chose to sabotage a critical meeting with your ego. The mention of the CEO's name had an immediate effect. Everyone in the room knew that Jonathan Sterling had personally recruited Sarah from their biggest competitor. He had made it clear that he expected the leadership team to support her completely. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, his face cycling through several shades of red. The power dynamic in the room had shifted so completely that it was almost tangible. What had started as his attempt to assert dominance had become a demonstration of Sarah's quiet, devastating authority. Jennifer Walsh found herself holding her breath. In 10 years with the company, she had never seen anyone challenge Marcus so directly and effectively. Usually, people either backed down from his aggressive tactics or got into shouting matches that accomplished nothing. David Chen was frantically taking mental notes. As someone who had always struggled with confrontational situations, he was witnessing a masterclass in professional assertiveness. Finally, Marcus pulled out his chair and sat down heavily. His voice, when he spoke, lacked all of its earlier bluster. Fine. Let's hear from the other departments. Sarah nodded once, as if his capitulation was exactly what she had expected.
Thank you. Jennifer, would you like to start with customer service?
Jennifer cleared her throat, still somewhat shaken by what she had witnessed.
Yes, well, we've received 17 complaints from Meridian in the past month.
The main issues seem to be centered around delivery times and product specifications that don't match their orders. As Jennifer spoke, Sarah took careful notes, asking clarifying questions and making sure she understood the full scope of the problems.
Her approach was methodical, professional, and inclusive.
She made sure that each department head felt heard and valued. Marcus sat silently through the entire process, his earlier confidence completely deflated. Occasionally he would shift in his seat or clear his throat as if to speak, but each time Sarah's steady gaze would fall on him, and he would remain quiet. When David Chen explained the IT challenges that had contributed to some of the ordering errors, Sarah asked detailed technical questions that demonstrated she had done her homework. When Tom Bradley discussed the manufacturing bottlenecks, she suggested process improvements that showed she understood his department's challenges. By the time they had heard from all 12 departments, a clear picture had emerged. The problems with Meridian weren't the result of any single department's failures, but rather a cascade of small issues that had compounded over time.
Sarah had been right to insist on getting input from everyone.
"Thank you all for those reports," Sarah said, looking around the table.
"Now I'd like to hear Marcus's proposal for addressing these issues."
Marcus looked up, surprised to be invited back into the conversation after his earlier behavior.
"Oh. Right. Well."
He shuffled through his papers, clearly trying to regain his composure.
"I was thinking we could offer them a 15% discount on their next quarter's orders and expedite their current backlog." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "That's one approach. What about addressing the root causes we've identified?" "Root causes?"
"The ordering system integration issues David mentioned.
The quality control gaps Tom identified.
The communication protocols Jennifer outlined."
If we only offer financial concessions without fixing the underlying problems, won't we just be setting ourselves up for the same issues again?
Marcus blinked several times, as if he hadn't considered this obvious point.
"Well, yes, I suppose we should look at those too." "Good," Sarah said, making a note. "I'd like to propose a comprehensive response plan. First, we address Meridian's immediate concerns with expedited delivery and appropriate concessions. Second, we implement system improvements to prevent these issues from recurring. Third, we establish better communication protocols between all departments to catch problems before they reach the client." She looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. "This will require cooperation from everyone, but I believe it's the only way to not just save this account, but strengthen our relationship with Meridian moving forward." Tom Bradley nodded approvingly. "That makes sense. We can have the manufacturing adjustments in place within a week. And I can have the IT integration fixes completed by Friday," David added. "Customer service can implement the new communication protocols immediately," Jennifer chimed in. Sarah smiled for the first time during the meeting. "Excellent. Marcus, I'd like you to coordinate with everyone to finalize the client-facing aspects of our response. Can you have a draft ready by tomorrow morning?" Marcus nodded quickly, seeming grateful to be included rather than sidelined. "Absolutely. I'll have it on your desk first thing." "Perfect. I'll review it and we'll present a unified response to Meridian by Thursday." Just as Sarah was beginning to outline the next steps, the conference room door opened and CEO Jonathan Sterling walked in. At 55, Sterling was an imposing figure with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. "Sorry I'm late, everyone," he said, taking a seat at the head of the table. "Traffic from the airport was murder. How are we doing with the Meridian situation?" Sarah quickly and officially briefed him on what they had discussed, outlining the problems they had identified and the comprehensive solution they had developed. Sterling listened carefully, asking a few clarifying questions and nodding approvingly at the thoroughness of their approach. "Sounds like you have it well in hand," Sterling said finally. "Marcus, what's your take on the proposed solution?" Marcus straightened in his chair, acutely aware that everyone was watching him.
After his earlier behavior, he knew his response was crucial.
I think Sarah has developed an excellent comprehensive approach, sir.
It addresses both the immediate client concerns and the long-term relationship health. Sterling raised an eyebrow slightly, perhaps picking up on some undercurrent he had missed, but he simply nodded.
Good. I want daily updates until this is resolved. Meridian is too important to lose.
As the meeting began to wind down, Sarah assigned specific responsibilities and timelines to each department. Her approach was clear, organized, and fair. She made sure everyone understood their role in the solution and felt ownership over the success of the plan. Marcus gathered his papers quietly, his earlier aggression replaced by what appeared to be grudging respect. As he stood to leave, he paused near Sarah's chair.
I'll have that draft ready tomorrow morning,
he said quietly, his tone completely different from the one he had used at the beginning of the meeting. Sarah looked up at him and nodded.
Thank you, Marcus. I know you want what's best for the company.
After everyone had filed out, Sarah remained in the conference room for a few minutes, organizing her notes and reflecting on what had just occurred. She had known that eventually she would have to establish her authority clearly, but she hadn't expected it to happen quite so dramatically. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the city sprawling out below. Somewhere down there, people were making decisions, solving problems, and working together to build something bigger than themselves. That's all she had ever wanted to do here at Sterling Industries. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Jennifer Walsh. That was amazing.
Thank you for handling that so professionally.
Another message came in from David Chen. You handled that perfectly. Looking forward to working on the IT improvements.
Sarah smiled as she gathered her things.
Leadership wasn't about being the loudest person in the room or intimidating others into submission. It was about bringing out the best in people, creating an environment where everyone could contribute, and having the strength to stand up for what was right when the moment demanded it. As she walked back to her office, Sarah knew that today had been a turning point. Not just for her relationship with Marcus, but for her role as a leader at Sterling Industries. She had proven that respect had to be earned, but, more importantly, she had shown that true authority came from competence, fairness, and the courage to do what was right. The afternoon sun streamed through her office windows as she began working on the detailed implementation plan for the Meridian response. There was still a lot of work to be done, but, for the first time since taking the COO position, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that only comes after a storm has passed. Sarah arrived at her office an hour early, as was her habit, to review the previous day's events and prepare for what lay ahead. The morning light filtered through her windows, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk that had once belonged to her predecessor, Robert Hutchins, who had retired after 25 years with the company. At exactly 8 o'clock, her assistant, Michelle, knocked on the door.
Good morning, Sarah. Marcus Whitfield is here with the Meridian response draft you requested.
Sarah looked up from her computer where she had been reviewing the quarterly performance reports.
Please send him in.
Marcus entered the office carrying a leather portfolio, his demeanor markedly different from the previous day. Gone was the swagger and confrontational attitude. Instead, he moved with the careful precision of someone who had learned a valuable lesson and wasn't eager to repeat his mistakes. Good morning, Sarah, he said, taking the chair across from her desk when she gestured for him to sit.
I have the draft response for Meridian. I think you'll find it comprehensive.
Sarah accepted the document and began reading through it carefully. Marcus had clearly put significant effort into the proposal, incorporating feedback from each department and addressing both immediate and long-term concerns. The writing was professional, the solutions were practical, and the tone struck the right balance between accountability and confidence. This is excellent work, Marcus, Sarah said, looking up from the pages.
You've integrated everyone's input effectively.
I particularly appreciate how you've structured the timeline to show Meridian exactly when they can expect each improvement to be implemented.
Marcus visibly relaxed. Thank you.
I wanted to make sure we presented a unified front. After yesterday's meeting, I realized I had been approaching this too narrowly. Sarah set the document down and leaned back in her chair.
Marcus, I think we should address what happened yesterday directly. We're going to be working together on this account recovery and many other projects. I need to know we can communicate effectively.
Marcus nodded, his expression serious.
You're absolutely right. I owe you an apology. My behavior yesterday was unprofessional and counterproductive.
I let my frustration with the situation cloud my judgment about how to handle it.
What frustrated you the most? Sarah asked, genuinely curious rather than confrontational.
Marcus considered the question carefully.
Honestly? I think I was scared. Meridian has been my biggest success story for years. When they started expressing dissatisfaction, I felt like it was a personal failure. Instead of looking at the situation objectively, I went into defensive mode. Sarah appreciated his honesty. That's understandable.
But, when you feel defensive, what happened yesterday is the opposite of what needs to happen. We need to be able to rely on each other, especially during challenging situations.
I understand that now, Marcus said. I've been thinking about it all night. You were right to insist on getting input from everyone.
I was so focused on protecting my relationship with the client that I wasn't seeing the bigger picture.
Sarah smiled slightly.
The bigger picture is usually where the real solutions are found. Individual departments can identify problems, but it takes the whole team working together to solve them effectively.
Marcus nodded. I can see that now. I've actually learned more about what's been going wrong with Meridian in the past 24 hours than I had in the previous month.
That's the power of collaborative problem solving, Sarah said.
When people feel safe to share information without being blamed or dismissed, you get a much clearer view of reality.
They spent the next hour refining the Meridian proposal, with Marcus contributing insights about the client's specific preferences and Sarah suggesting ways to strengthen their long-term relationship strategy. The conversation was productive and professional, a stark contrast to the tension of the previous day.
Around 10 o'clock, Jennifer Walsh appeared in Sarah's doorway.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just received a call from
Patricia Morrison at Meridian.
She wants to schedule a meeting for this afternoon to discuss their concerns before they make any final decisions about the contract.
Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances.
This was exactly the kind of high-pressure situation that could either save or doom their relationship with the client.
Did she say who she wants to meet with? Sarah asked.
She specifically requested both you and Marcus, Jennifer replied. She said she wants to hear from leadership about how Sterling Industries plans to address their concerns.
After Jennifer left, Marcus turned to Sarah. How do you want to handle this?
Usually, I would take the lead on client meetings for accounts I manage.
Sarah considered this carefully.
The old Marcus would have demanded to run the meeting and probably wouldn't have even mentioned Sarah's role to the client.
This question suggested he had genuinely learned from yesterday's experience.
I think we should present as a unified team, Sarah said. You know Patricia's communication style and the history of the relationship.
I can speak to the systematic changes we're implementing and our long-term commitment to improvement. If we work together, we'll be much stronger than either of us would be alone.
Marcus smiled for the first time since entering her office.
That sounds perfect.
I know Patricia appreciates directness and concrete solutions.
She's not interested in excuses or blame shifting.
Good. Then, let's spend some time preparing our presentation. I want to make sure we're completely aligned on our message. For the next 2 hours, Sarah and Marcus worked together to develop their presentation for Meridian. They identified the key points that needed to be addressed, divided the presentation responsibilities based on their respective strengths, and practiced their delivery to ensure smooth transitions between speakers. Marcus proved to be an excellent collaborator when his ego wasn't involved. He provided valuable insights about Patricia's priorities and communication preferences, while Sarah contributed strategic thinking about how to position Sterling Industries for long-term success with the account. You know, Marcus said during a break in their preparation, I've been doing this all wrong for years. I've been thinking of myself as the sole owner of client relationships, but that's actually a weakness. If I'm the only person who really understands a client's needs,
What happens if I'm out sick or leave the company? Sarah nodded approvingly. Exactly. Sustainable success requires building systems and relationships that don't depend on any single person.
It's more resilient and, ultimately, more valuable for everyone involved. At noon, they broke for lunch, but both were too nervous about the afternoon meeting to eat much. Instead, they spent the time in the conference room, reviewing their materials one final time and discussing potential questions Patricia might ask. David Shin stopped by to update them on the IT improvements that would be ready to implement immediately. Tom Bradley called to confirm that the manufacturing adjustments could begin within 48 hours of receiving approval from the client. The entire team was rallying to support the effort to save the Meridian account. At 2 o'clock, Sarah and Marcus arrived at Meridian's corporate headquarters, a sleek glass building in the financial district. Patricia Morrison's assistant escorted them to a conference room on the 20th floor, where they waited for 10 minutes that felt like an hour. Patricia Morrison was a woman in her early 50s with short gray hair and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She had built Meridian Corp from a small family business into a major player in their industry, and she was known for making quick, decisive judgments about the people and companies she worked with. "Sarah, Marcus," she said as she entered the room, shaking hands with both of them. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. I'll be direct with you. We've been very disappointed with Sterling Industries lately, and we're seriously considering taking our business elsewhere." Marcus started to speak, but Sarah caught his eye and gave him an almost imperceptible nod. They had agreed that she would open the meeting. "Patricia, we appreciate your directness, and we want to be equally direct with you," Sarah began. "We've identified specific systemic issues that have been affecting your account, and we have a comprehensive plan to address them immediately." She handed Patricia a bound copy of their proposal. "Rather than making excuses or asking for your patience while we figure things out, we want to show you exactly what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, and how you'll be able to measure our progress." Patricia opened the document and began reading, her expression neutral but attentive. After a few minutes, she looked up. "This level of detail is impressive. But I've seen a lot of impressive proposals that didn't translate into improved performance. What makes you think this time will be different?" Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Patricia, I'll be honest with you. Part of the problem has been my approach to managing your account. I was so focused on maintaining our relationship that I wasn't paying enough attention to the operational issues that were affecting your experience." Patricia raised an eyebrow. This wasn't what she had expected to hear. "Yesterday, our leadership team had a frank discussion about the problems you've been experiencing," Marcus continued. "Sarah insisted that we hear from every department about how their operations impact your account. What we discovered was that small issues in multiple areas were creating cascading problems that were affecting your orders." Sarah picked up the thread. "The good news is that now we understand the root causes, and we have specific solutions for each one. More importantly, we're implementing new communication protocols to ensure these issues are caught and resolved before they impact any of our clients." Patricia was clearly intrigued. "Give me an example." Marcus nodded to Sarah, who pulled out a detailed timeline. "Your recent order for specialized components was delayed because our ordering system didn't properly flag the custom specifications. This caused manufacturing to produce standard components, which then had to be scrapped and remade. The delay cascaded through to 3 subsequent orders. We've now implemented system integration improvements that will flag custom specifications immediately and route them to the appropriate specialists," Marcus added. "Additionally, we've established daily communication between our ordering, manufacturing, and quality control departments to catch any potential issues before they affect production." Patricia made a note in the margin of the proposal. "How long will these improvements take to implement?" "The IT improvements go live Friday," Sarah replied. "The new communication protocols started yesterday. The manufacturing process changes can begin within 48 hours of your approval." "And what about the financial impact of the delays you've already caused?" Marcus had prepared for this question. "We're proposing a 15% discount on your next quarter's orders, plus expedited shipping at no charge for any orders that are currently behind schedule. Additionally, we're implementing a service level guarantee that provides automatic credits if we miss our delivery commitments in the future.
Patricia was quiet for a long moment, studying the proposal and making notes. Finally, she looked up at both of them. "I'll be honest with you both. I was ready to cancel our contract and move to one of your competitors. We've been frustrated not just with the service issues, but with the lack of accountability and problem solving we've experienced." Sarah felt her stomach tighten, but she maintained her professional expression. However, Patricia continued, "This conversation has been different. You've clearly taken the time to understand our concerns, you've developed specific solutions rather than vague promises, and you're taking ownership of the problems instead of making excuses." Marcus and Sarah exchanged a quick glance.
"I'm willing to give Sterling Industries another chance," Patricia said, "but with conditions.
I want weekly progress reports on the implementation of these improvements. I want a direct escalation path if issues arise.
And I want the service level guarantees formalized in our contract."
Sarah smiled. "We can absolutely meet those conditions. Would you prefer the progress reports in writing or via conference call?"
"Conference calls. I want to be able to ask questions and get immediate answers."
"Perfect.
We can start with weekly calls and adjust the frequency based on how the implementation goes." Patricia closed the proposal and looked at both of them seriously.
"I want you both to understand something.
Meridian Corp values relationships, but we can't sacrifice our business operations for the sake of loyalty. If these improvements don't materialize as promised, we will take our business elsewhere without further discussion."
"We completely understand," Marcus replied.
"And we appreciate the opportunity to prove that we can deliver on these commitments." They spent another 30 minutes working through the specific details of implementation timelines, communication protocols, and success metrics. By the time the meeting ended, Patricia seemed satisfied with their responses and committed to giving Sterling Industries the chance to rebuild their relationship. As they walked back to their car, Marcus turned to Sarah.
"That was masterfully handled.
The way you structured the conversation and kept us focused on solutions rather than problems made all the difference."
Sarah smiled.
"We both contributed to that success. Your knowledge of Patricia's communication style and your willingness to take accountability were crucial."
She responded well to the honesty.
"I never would have approached it that way before yesterday," Marcus admitted. "I would have spent the whole meeting defending our past performance instead of focusing on future improvements. It's amazing what happens when we stop trying to protect our egos and start trying to solve problems," Sarah observed. When they returned to Sterling Industries, word of the successful meeting spread quickly through the office. Jennifer Walsh stopped by Sarah's office to congratulate them, and David Shin called to confirm that the IT improvements would be ready ahead of schedule.
CEO Jonathan Sterling stopped by around 4 o'clock.
"I heard the Meridian meeting went well. Patricia Morrison called me personally to say she was impressed with your presentation." Sarah and Marcus exchanged pleased glances. "She specifically mentioned the level of preparation and the collaborative approach you took," Sterling continued. "She said it was clear you had worked together to understand her concerns rather than just trying to sell her on staying with us."
"The team effort made all the difference," Sarah said.
"When everyone contributes their expertise, we get much better solutions."
After Sterling left, Marcus lingered in Sarah's office.
"I wanted to thank you again for how you handled yesterday's meeting. You could have embarrassed me in front of the entire team, but instead you found a way to redirect the conversation constructively."
Sarah considered this.
"Marcus, I wasn't trying to embarrass you or assert dominance. I was trying to solve a problem.
The problem wasn't just Meridian's dissatisfaction, it was the breakdown in our team's ability to work together effectively. I realize that now.
I've learned more about leadership in the past 2 days than I have in the past 2 years." As the afternoon wore on, Sarah reflected on how dramatically things had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday's confrontation with Marcus could have permanently damaged their working relationship and potentially cost the company a major client. Instead, it had become a catalyst for better communication, improved processes, and a stronger team dynamic. The key, she realized, hadn't been winning the confrontation with Marcus, but rather creating an environment where everyone could contribute to finding real solutions. True leadership wasn't about being the smartest or strongest person in the room, it was about bringing out the best in everyone and focusing that collective energy on achieving shared goals.
Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Patricia Morrison.
"Sarah, I wanted to call and thank you for today's meeting. I've been dealing with account management issues for 20 years, and I can usually tell within the first 5 minutes whether a company is serious about solving problems or just trying to buy time with promises they can't keep." "I'm glad we were able to demonstrate our commitment," Sarah replied.
"You did more than that.
You showed me a level of preparation, accountability, and collaborative thinking that gives me confidence in Sterling Industries' ability to be a long-term partner.
I'm looking forward to seeing these improvements implemented."
After hanging up, Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction.
The crisis that could have destroyed an important client relationship had instead become an opportunity to strengthen it.
The confrontation that could have divided the leadership team had instead brought them closer together. As she prepared to leave for the day, Sarah made a mental note to send thank you messages to each department head who had contributed to the Meridian solution. Success like this was only possible when everyone felt valued and empowered to contribute their best work. The setting sun painted the city skyline in shades of gold and orange as Sarah gathered her things. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but today had proven that with the right approach, even the most difficult situations could become opportunities for growth and improvement. She thought about Marcus and how much their working relationship had evolved in just 2 days. Sometimes the people who challenge us the most end up teaching us the most about ourselves and our capabilities. The key was learning to see past the conflict to the opportunities for mutual understanding and shared success. As she walked to the elevator, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not because she had won a confrontation, but because she had helped create something better for everyone involved. That, she realized, was what real leadership looked like.
3 weeks later, the transformation at Sterling Industries was becoming evident to everyone in the company.
The weekly progress calls with Patricia Morrison had become model sessions of accountability and transparency that other account managers were asking to observe. The systematic improvements Sarah had championed were producing measurable results across multiple departments.
On a Thursday morning in early April, Sarah arrived at the office to find an email from CEO Jonathan Sterling requesting a meeting at 9 o'clock.
The message was brief and gave no indication of the topic, which made her slightly nervous. In her experience, unscheduled meetings with the CEO were rarely routine. Sterling's office occupied the corner of the executive floor, with windows facing both north and west, providing a commanding view of the city. His assistant, Robert, gestured for Sarah to enter when she arrived precisely at 9.
"Good morning, Sarah," Sterling said, rising from behind his desk. "Please, have a seat." "Coffee?"
"Thank you, that would be great," Sarah replied, settling into one of the leather chairs arranged around a small conference table by the windows.
Sterling poured coffee from a silver service and joined her at the table.
At 55, he had the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort, the result of 30 years building Sterling Industries from a small regional company into a major player in their industry. "I wanted to discuss the changes I've been observing over the past few weeks," Sterling began. "The Meridian account recovery has been impressive, obviously, but I'm more interested in the broader impacts I'm seeing throughout the organization."
Sarah set down her coffee cup. "What kinds of impacts are you noticing?"
"For starters, the communication between departments has improved dramatically. Tom Bradley told me yesterday that the coordination between manufacturing and quality control is the best it's been in years. David Chin says the IT improvements you championed are being requested by other account managers for their clients."
Sterling pulled out a folder containing several reports.
"More significantly, I'm seeing changes in how our leadership team approaches problems. The collaborative methodology you used for the Meridian situation is being adopted for other challenging accounts."
Sarah felt a mixture of pride and curiosity. "That's encouraging to hear. Has there been any pushback to the changes?" That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you, Sterling said, his expression becoming more serious. Yesterday, I received a concerning phone call from David Harrison at Harrison & Associates. Sarah's stomach tightened.
Harrison & Associates was one of their top-tier clients, representing nearly $8 million in annual revenue. David Harrison was known throughout the industry as a demanding client who expected perfection and had little patience for operational issues.
What kind of concerns did he express? Sarah asked.
Sterling leaned back in his chair. Harrison said he's been dealing with Marcus Whitfield for several years and has always been satisfied with the personal attention and quick decision-making Marcus provided. However, recently Marcus has been involving other departments in discussions that Harrison feels should be handled directly between the two of them.
Sarah felt a sinking sensation.
The collaborative approaches that had been so successful with Meridian and other accounts apparently weren't being received well by all clients. Harrison specifically mentioned feeling like he was being managed by committee and said he missed the days when Marcus could make decisions and solve problems without having to consult with multiple departments, Sterling continued.
Did he threaten to cancel the account? Sarah asked.
Not in so many words, but he made it clear that he's evaluating whether Sterling Industries is still the right fit for his needs. He said he values efficiency and direct communication, and he feels like our recent changes have made us more bureaucratic rather than more responsive. Sarah absorbed this information, her mind racing through the implications. The systematic approaches that had saved the Meridian account might be jeopardizing another major client relationship.
What's your assessment of the situation? Sterling asked. Sarah considered her response carefully. It sounds like we may have overcorrected.
The collaborative approach was necessary for Meridian because their problems required input from multiple departments. But Harrison's account has been stable and successful under Marcus's direct management. Trying to fix something that wasn't broken may have created unnecessary complications.
Sterling nodded approvingly. My thoughts exactly. The question is, how do we address this without undermining the positive changes we've made elsewhere?
I think the key is recognizing that different clients have different needs and communication preferences, Sarah said. Some accounts benefit from the systematic approach we used with Meridian.
Others, like Harrison, prefer the direct relationship model that Marcus has been using successfully. How do we determine which approach to use with which clients? Sarah thought about this for a moment.
I think it should be based on the account's history, the client's communication preferences, and the complexity of their needs. Stable accounts with satisfied clients probably don't need systematic intervention.
Accounts with recurring problems or complex requirements benefit from the collaborative approach. Sterling made a note in the folder. That makes sense. But, how do we communicate this to the team without making it seem like we're abandoning the improvements we've made?
I think we need to frame it as customizing our approach to each client's preferences rather than applying a one-size-fits-all methodology, Sarah suggested. The collaborative tools and improved communication between departments should still be available when needed, but they shouldn't be mandatory for every client interaction.
I like that approach, Sterling said. It preserves the improvements while avoiding the bureaucratic trap Harrison is concerned about.
They spent the next 30 minutes developing a framework for determining when to use collaborative approaches versus direct account management. The key factors included the client's communication preferences, the account's stability and satisfaction levels, the complexity of their requirements, and any history of operational issues. I'd like you to discuss this with Marcus, Sterling said as their meeting concluded. He needs to understand that this isn't a criticism of the collaborative approach, but rather a recognition that different clients need different types of service.
Absolutely. I think he'll understand.
His experience with Harrison over the years gives him valuable insights into what that client values most.
After leaving Sterling's office, Sarah walked slowly back to her own, thinking about the delicate balance required in implementing organizational changes.
The success with Meridian had been so dramatic that it was tempting to assume the same approach would work for every client, but Harrison's feedback was an important reminder that effective leadership meant adapting strategies to specific situations rather than applying universal solutions.
She found Marcus in his office, reviewing quarterly performance reports.
When she knocked on his door, he looked up with a smile that had become much more genuine over the past few weeks.
"Good morning, Sarah. How did your meeting with Sterling go?"
Sarah entered and closed the door behind her.
"That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you.
We may have a situation developing with the Harrison account." Marcus's expression immediately became concerned.
"What kind of situation?" Sarah explained Sterling's conversation with David Harrison, watching Marcus's face as he processed the information.
She could see him cycling through various emotions: confusion, concern, and what looked like a touch of guilt.
"Oh no," Marcus said when she finished. "I think I know exactly what happened.
Last week, Harrison called with a question about modifying his standing orders for next quarter. Instead of handling it directly like I usually do, I brought in Tom from manufacturing and Jennifer from customer service to discuss the best way to implement the changes."
How did Harrison react during that conversation?
He seemed impatient, but I thought it was just because the call ran longer than expected. Now I realize he was probably frustrated that what used to be a 5-minute conversation between the two of us had become a 30-minute meeting with multiple people.
Sarah nodded.
That matches what Sterling described.
Harrison specifically mentioned feeling like he was being managed by committee.
Marcus ran his hand through his hair. I was so enthusiastic about the collaborative approach after seeing how well it worked with Meridian that I started applying it everywhere.
I didn't consider that different clients might have different preferences.
The collaborative approach was absolutely the right strategy for Meridian, Sarah said.
Their account had multiple systematic problems that required input from various departments.
But Harrison's account has been stable and successful under your direct management. There was no reason to change an approach that was already working. So how do we fix this without making Harrison feel like we're going backward or admitting the improvements were a mistake?
Sarah sat down across from his desk.
I think we need to have a direct conversation with Harrison. We acknowledge that we may have overcomplicated some interactions that were working well before, and we assure him that we're customizing our approach to his preferences and needs.
Marcus nodded slowly. That makes sense.
Harrison values efficiency and direct communication. He's always appreciated being able to call me directly and get immediate answers without having to explain his needs to multiple people.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that preference.
Some clients want to be deeply involved in the collaborative process, while others prefer to delegate the details and focus on outcomes.
Should I call him today? Sarah considered this.
I think we should prepare for that conversation carefully. Harrison is clearly frustrated, and we want to make sure we address his concerns without making him feel like his feedback was wrong or unreasonable. They spent the next hour developing a strategy for the Harrison conversation. Marcus would acknowledge the recent changes in how his account had been handled, explain the reasoning behind the collaborative approach, and assure Harrison that they were returning to the direct communication model that had been successful in the past. The key is to frame it as us learning to customize our service to his specific preferences rather than as us abandoning the improvements we've made, Sarah emphasized.
Right.
And I should probably give him some concrete examples of how this will work going forward. At 2 o'clock, Marcus called David Harrison while Sarah listened in on speakerphone. Harrison answered on the second ring, his voice crisp and businesslike. "David, this is Marcus from Sterling Industries. I wanted to follow up on our conversation with Jonathan Sterling yesterday."
"Marcus, good. I was hoping to hear from you.
I have to tell you, I've been concerned about some changes in how my account has been handled recently."
Marcus took a breath.
"I understand your concerns completely, and I want to address them directly. Over the past few weeks, we've been implementing some new collaborative approaches that have been very successful with certain accounts. However, I realize that I may have applied these approaches to your account unnecessarily." "Go on," Harrison said, his tone neutral but attentive. "Your account has been stable and successful for years under our direct communication model. You value efficiency and quick decision-making, and our recent approach may have introduced complications that weren't necessary or beneficial."
"I appreciate your honesty," Harrison said. I was starting to wonder if Sterling Industries was becoming too bureaucratic for my needs.
That's exactly the opposite of what we want, Marcus replied.
Moving forward, we're returning to the direct communication model that has worked so well for your account.
When you call with questions or requests, I'll handle them personally without unnecessary consultation or committee discussions. Sarah made a subtle thumbs-up gesture to Marcus, who was handling the conversation perfectly. However, Marcus continued, I want you to know that if you ever have complex requirements that would benefit from input from multiple departments, we have improved systems in place to coordinate that efficiently. But, those resources will only be used when they add value to your experience, not as a standard procedure. Harrison was quiet for a moment. That sounds much more like the Sterling Industries I've been working with for years. I appreciate that you're willing to adapt your approach to what works best for each client.
Absolutely.
Your satisfaction and efficiency are our top priorities.
Is there anything specific you'd like to discuss about how we'll handle your account going forward?
Actually, yes. I have some modifications I'd like to make to my Q3 orders.
Can we discuss those now, just the two of us? Marcus smiled at Sarah.
Of course.
Let me pull up your account information.
The rest of the conversation proceeded smoothly, with Marcus handling Harrison's requests directly and efficiently. By the time the call ended, Harrison seemed satisfied that Sterling Industries was returning to the service model that worked best for his needs.
After hanging up, Marcus turned to Sarah. That went better than I expected.
Harrison seemed relieved that we acknowledged the issue and took steps to address it immediately. The key was your willingness to take responsibility and explain our reasoning without making excuses, Sarah observed. He appreciated the honesty and the commitment to customizing our approach to his preferences. Over the next few days, Sarah worked with the leadership team to develop guidelines for determining when to use collaborative approaches versus direct account management. The framework they created helped account managers assess each client's preferences and needs, ensuring that the improvements they had made would be applied appropriately rather than universally. Jennifer Walsh proved particularly helpful in this process, as her customer service team had insights into which clients preferred detailed consultation versus streamlined service.
David Chin contributed technical perspectives on when systematic approaches were necessary versus when direct solutions were more appropriate.
Tom Bradley, whose manufacturing department had benefited significantly from the improved communication protocols, helped identify which types of client requests required input from multiple departments versus those that could be handled through existing processes.
The resulting framework was elegant in its simplicity. Stable accounts with satisfied clients would continue using proven direct management approaches. Accounts with complex requirements or recurring issues would benefit from collaborative intervention.
Most importantly, account managers were empowered to adapt their approach based on client feedback and changing circumstances.
At the weekly leadership meeting the following Tuesday, Sterling asked Sarah to present the new framework to the entire team.
As she outlined the principles behind customized account management, she could see understanding and approval in the faces around the table. This approach preserves the improvements we've made while avoiding the trap of over-engineering successful relationships, Sterling observed. It requires more judgment from account managers, but that's what we should expect from professionals at this level.
Marcus nodded approvingly.
It's given me much more confidence in my client interactions. Instead of wondering whether I should involve other departments, I now have clear criteria for making those decisions. Jennifer added, from a customer service perspective, this has helped us focus our collaborative efforts where they'll have the most impact rather than spreading them too thin across every account.
After the meeting, Sarah reflected on how the Harrison situation had ultimately strengthened their approach rather than undermining it.
The initial success with Meridian had been so dramatic that it was natural to want to replicate it everywhere, but Harrison's feedback had provided crucial insight into the importance of matching strategies to specific situations. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Patricia Morrison from Meridian Corporation. Sarah, I wanted to give you an update on our Q2 performance. The improvements you implemented have exceeded our expectations. Our order accuracy is up 97%, delivery times have improved by an average of 4 days, and the communication has been outstanding.
Sarah smiled. That's wonderful to hear, Patricia. How has the weekly progress call process been working for you? Perfectly.
Having direct access to the relevant department heads when issues arise has prevented small problems from becoming major disruptions.
I'm actually recommending Sterling Industries to 2 other companies in our industry.
After the call ended, Sarah realized that both the Meridian success and the Harrison situation had taught the same fundamental lesson. Effective leadership meant understanding what each situation required and having the flexibility to adapt accordingly. There was no single approach that worked for every client, every team, or every challenge. The collaborative methodology had been exactly what Meridian needed: comprehensive, systematic, and transparent. The direct communication model was exactly what Harrison valued: efficient, streamlined, and personal. The key was having the wisdom to recognize which approach would be most effective in each situation. As she prepared to leave the office that evening, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not because everything had gone perfectly, but because the organization had demonstrated the ability to learn, adapt, and improve continuously. The setback with Harrison had become an opportunity to develop a more sophisticated understanding of client service, and the team had emerged stronger and more capable as a result. The city lights were beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk as Sarah gathered her things. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but today had reinforced her confidence in the team's ability to handle whatever came their way. That was the real measure of successful leadership, not the absence of problems, but the capacity to learn from them and grow stronger in the process. 6 months after the confrontation that had changed everything, Sarah Martinez stood before the Sterling Industries Board of Directors, delivering her quarterly presentation with the confidence that comes from proven results. The boardroom was filled with the company's investors, senior executives, and external board members who had watched her transformation from a promising but untested COO into a leader who had fundamentally improved how the company operated. Our client retention rate has improved to 94%, the highest in company history, Sarah reported, clicking to the next slide of her presentation. More significantly, our client satisfaction scores have increased across all service categories, with particularly strong improvements in communication effectiveness and problem resolution speed. Board Chairman William Ashford, a veteran of the industry who had initially expressed reservations about Sarah's appointment, leaned forward with interest.
Those are impressive numbers, Sarah. Can you walk us through what's driving these improvements?
Sarah advanced to a slide showing client feedback trends. The key has been developing customized service approaches based on each client's specific needs and communication preferences. Instead of applying a one-size-fits-all methodology, our account managers now have frameworks for determining when collaborative approaches are most effective versus when direct communication is preferred.
CEO Jonathan Sterling smiled as he listened to Sarah's presentation.
In the months since the Meridian crisis, he had watched her evolve into exactly the kind of leader he had hoped she would become when he recruited her. Her ability to turn a potential disaster into a catalyst for organizational improvement had exceeded even his optimistic expectations. Marcus Whitfield, who was also present for the presentation, felt a complex mixture of pride and humility as he listened to Sarah describe their successes. The confrontation that had embarrassed him so thoroughly 6 months ago had ultimately taught him more about leadership than the previous 10 years of his career. Their working relationship had become one of mutual respect and genuine collaboration. "Can you give us specific examples of how this customized approach works in practice?" asked board member Dr. Elizabeth Chan, who ran her own consulting firm and was particularly interested in operational efficiency. "Certainly," Sarah replied, clicking to a case study slide. Our Meridian account required systematic intervention with input from multiple departments to address complex operational issues. We implemented weekly progress calls, cross-departmental coordination protocols, and detailed reporting structures. This approach was exactly what they needed, and they've become one of our most satisfied clients.
She clicked to the next slide.
Conversely, our Harrison account preferred streamlined, direct communication without unnecessary consultation or committee involvement. For them, efficiency and quick decision-making are the highest priorities. We maintained direct account management while ensuring that collaborative resources were available if needed. Board member Robert Martinez raised his hand.
How do you determine which approach to use with new clients?
We've developed an assessment framework that considers the client's communication preferences, account complexity, historical satisfaction levels, and specific industry requirements, Sarah explained. Our account managers are trained to recognize the indicators and adapt their approach accordingly, but they also have the flexibility to adjust based on client feedback and changing circumstances. The presentation continued for another 20 minutes, with Sarah fielding questions about implementation challenges, cost implications, and future development plans. Her responses were detailed, thoughtful, and demonstrated a deep understanding of both strategic vision and operational reality. After the formal presentation concluded, the board members mingled with the management team over coffee and light refreshments. William Ashford approached Sarah with an expression that had completely changed from his initial skepticism.
Sarah, I have to tell you, when Jonathan first proposed your appointment as COO, I had concerns about whether someone with your level of experience could handle the complexities of this role, he said. I'm happy to say that your performance has exceeded all expectations. Thank you, Mr. Ashford. I appreciate the board's patience as I learned the intricacies of the position. What impressed me most wasn't just the results you've achieved, but the way you've handled setbacks and used them as learning opportunities, Ashford continued. The Harrison situation could have derailed everything you had built with Meridian, but instead you used it to develop a more sophisticated approach that benefits all our clients. Dr. Chen joined their conversation.
I'm particularly interested in how you've managed to change the organizational culture while maintaining individual accountability.
That's one of the most challenging aspects of leadership transformation. Sarah considered the question.
I think the key was focusing on empowerment rather than control. Instead of trying to mandate specific behaviors, we gave people frameworks and tools that helped them make better decisions. When people feel trusted and supported, they usually rise to meet higher expectations. Marcus, who had been listening to the conversation, added, Sarah created an environment where admitting mistakes and asking for help became strengths rather than weaknesses. That completely changed how we approach problem solving.
Can you elaborate on that? Dr. Chen asked.
Before, if an account manager was having problems with a client, there was an incentive to try to handle it alone rather than admit difficulties, Marcus explained. Now, we have systems in place that encourage early intervention and collaborative problem solving.
It's much easier to prevent small issues from becoming major crises.
After the board members left, the management team gathered in the conference room for their regular debrief. The mood was celebratory but professional, reflecting the culture Sarah had worked to establish over the past months.
Outstanding presentation, Sterling said to Sarah.
The board was clearly impressed with both the results and the methodology. William Ashford specifically mentioned to me that he's gained tremendous confidence in our leadership team's capabilities. Jennifer Walsh raised her hand. I wanted to share some feedback I've been receiving from our customer service team. The new communication protocols have significantly improved their ability to resolve client issues quickly. They feel more empowered to make decisions and know when to escalate problems appropriately.
David Chen nodded enthusiastically. The IT improvements we implemented for Meridian have been requested by 8 other major accounts.
What started as a crisis response has become a competitive advantage. Tom Bradley added, manufacturing has seen the most dramatic improvements in coordination and efficiency that I've experienced in 15 years with the company. The communication between departments has eliminated most of the bottlenecks that used to cause production delays. As the meeting continued, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that confrontational morning 6 months ago. The transformation hadn't just been about implementing new systems or processes, it had been about fundamentally changing how people thought about collaboration, accountability, and leadership. Marcus had become one of her strongest allies, not because he had been defeated in some kind of power struggle, but because he had learned to see leadership differently. Instead of viewing it as individual dominance, he now understood it as collective empowerment. His accounts were performing better than ever, and he had become a mentor to newer account managers. Jennifer Walsh had grown into a more confident leader herself, taking initiative on projects that crossed departmental boundaries and developing solutions that none of them would have thought of individually. David Chen had transformed from a technically competent but cautious manager into someone who actively looked for ways to use technology to solve business problems and improve client experiences. Even Tom Bradley, who had initially been skeptical of any changes to manufacturing processes that had worked reliably for years, had become an advocate for continuous improvement and cross-departmental collaboration. After the meeting ended, Sarah returned to her office to find a note from her assistant that Patricia Morrison had called with another referral. This would be the fourth new client Meridian had referred to Sterling Industries, representing more than $5 million in potential annual revenue.
Her phone rang almost immediately. It was Patricia Morrison herself.
"Sarah, I wanted to personally thank you for the exceptional service we've received over the past 6 months. Meridian Corp has been in business for 25 years, and we've never had a vendor relationship that combined reliability, responsiveness, and innovation as effectively as Sterling Industries has."
"That's wonderful to hear, Patricia. Your feedback and collaboration have been essential to our improvements. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I've been asked to speak at the National Industry Association conference next month about vendor relationship management. I'd like to use our partnership as a case study of how companies can work together to achieve mutual success." Sarah was honored by the request. "We'd be delighted to have you share our story. Would you like one of our team members to participate in the presentation? I was hoping you might be willing to co-present with me."
I think the conference attendees would benefit from hearing both the client and vendor perspectives on building effective partnerships. After confirming the details for the conference presentation, Sarah sat back in her chair and looked out at the city skyline. The view from her office windows had become familiar over the past months, but today it seemed different, brighter, more full of possibility. The transformation at Sterling Industries had exceeded her most optimistic expectations, not because everything had gone perfectly, but because the team had learned to turn challenges into opportunities for growth and improvement. The confrontation with Marcus that could have been a career-ending disaster had become the foundation for a stronger, more collaborative leadership culture.
Her computer chimed with an email from a headhunter offering her a CEO position at a competing firm for significantly more money.
Sarah read through the offer carefully, but she felt no temptation to consider it seriously. She had found something more valuable than a bigger title or higher salary. She had found a place where she could make a meaningful difference and continue growing as a leader.
The phone rang again.
This time it was Marcus. "Sarah, I wanted to let you know that Harrison just signed a 3-year contract extension. He specifically mentioned that the service improvements over the past few months convinced him that Sterling Industries is committed to long-term partnership rather than just transactional relationships."
"That's fantastic news, Marcus. Your relationship management with that account has been exemplary.
I couldn't have done it without the systems and support you've put in place. Having the collaborative resources available when needed, while maintaining the direct communication he prefers, has given me the best of both worlds." As the day wound down, Sarah made her final rounds through the office, a habit she had developed to stay connected with the day-to-day operations and maintain visibility with the team. The energy in the workplace had changed dramatically over the past months. People seemed more engaged, more collaborative, and more confident in their ability to handle whatever challenges arose. In the customer service department, she found Jennifer Walsh training a new team member on the escalation protocols they had developed. The training was thorough but encouraging, focusing on empowerment and problem-solving rather than just following procedures. In IT, David Chen was working late on a new integration project that would benefit 3 different client accounts simultaneously. The project had emerged from his growing understanding of how technology could create value across multiple relationships rather than just solving individual problems. In manufacturing, the evening shift was coordinating with quality control on a rush order for one of their newer clients. The communication was smooth and efficient, a far cry from the siloed operations that had created problems just months ago. As Sarah prepared to leave for the day, she reflected on the lessons she had learned during this transformative period. The most important insight was that true leadership wasn't about having all the answers or being the strongest person in the room. It was about creating environments where everyone could contribute their best work toward shared goals. The confrontation with Marcus had been a crucial moment, not because she had won some kind of power struggle, but because it had forced both of them to examine their assumptions about leadership, collaboration, and success. The real victory hadn't been silencing Marcus in that meeting, it had been helping him discover a more effective way to lead that ultimately made everyone more successful. The Sterling Industries leadership team had evolved from a collection of individual performers into a genuinely collaborative organization. They had learned to customize their approaches to different situations while maintaining consistent standards of excellence. Most importantly, they had created a culture where continuous learning and improvement were valued more than protecting egos or maintaining status quo. As Sarah walked to her car in the company parking garage, she thought about the conference presentation she would be giving with Patricia Morrison next month. They would be sharing their story with hundreds of industry professionals, demonstrating how companies could work together to achieve mutual success through effective communication, collaborative problem-solving, and mutual respect. The story they would tell wouldn't be about a confrontation that was won or lost, but about a transformation that had benefited everyone involved. It would be about learning that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from empowering them to do their best work. It would be about discovering that the most sustainable success comes from building systems and relationships that don't depend on any single person's authority or expertise. Most of all, it would be about the recognition that in today's complex business environment, the leaders who thrive are those who can bring out the best in others, adapt their approaches to different situations, and maintain the humility to learn from their mistakes and grow stronger in the process. As Sarah drove home through the city streets, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction and anticipation. The past 6 months had proven that with the right approach, even the most challenging situations could become opportunities for positive transformation. The future was full of possibilities, and she was eager to see what new challenges and opportunities lay ahead for the Sterling Industries team.